Good morning, family. I'm an addict. My name is Gina. There are a lot of you here on Sunday morning. God is good today. I'm better than blessed this morning. I woke up today without the desire to use. And I also just woke up. And you can laugh about that, but you know what? A lot of addicts didn't get the chance to wake up today because they didn't hear the message, or they heard the message and they chose not to listen to it. So I remember the privilege that I have of opening up my eyes every day and knowing that I'm alive another day by the grace of a loving God and the fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. I would like to thank the Washington, Northern Idaho region from the bottom of my heart. Your hospitality is terrific. And you know, for somebody who grew up feeling like I didn't belong any goddamn place I ever went, the miracle of Narcotics Anonymous is wherever I go, it's home. Ted and Marge, thank you for your hospitality. Camilla, Barb, thanks for coming. And to my brother and sister-in-law who are at their very first Narcotics Anonymous convention. And to anybody... And to anybody else here, if you're here with one day, if you're here with no days, if you think you might have the desire, if you're not even sure, welcome home. Yeah. Welcome home. And please, you know, David said it last night, and it's so important. Don't keep coming back, man. We got people back home that just keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back, and I'm glad to see that they're back. But you know, I watched a lot of these people and watched their time run out. I watched their luck run out. I buried more people since I got here than I did when I was using. They told me in my first year that I better have a suit hanging in the closet because I was going to be attending some funerals in here. And for anybody who keeps wanting to buck in the odds, you know, I don't understand why you hear a message and you're handed a gift, and this fellowship is a gift from God. This program is a gift from God, and no human being can take away a gift from God. You can only give it back to God yourself and tell him, no thanks, I don't want it. I don't talk about using, and I don't talk about using for a lot of reasons, and the main reason is because most of what I remember about my using is a crock of bullshit. Most of the stories I would like to tell you are a lie. I was one of those grandiose addicts. I told a bunch of lies when I was using, and I told them long enough and hard enough that they became part of my story and they became the truth. And they never happened. And I would like to glamorize for you what it was like. And I don't want to tell you a war story, but I will tell you that I believe that when we talk about our feelings, that we begin to identify with one another. And if I talk to you about the way that I feel, you understand what I'm talking about because you're an addict also, and we share the common bond of addiction. And I don't care where you come from or how you used or what color you are, how old you are, what your sexual preference is. If you're HIV positive or not, when I tell you I'm an addict, you know how I feel. You understand and you've been there. You know? And the way that I felt was the way that I felt when I came into the rooms, because I wasn't using anymore and the feelings were there and I couldn't medicate them. And all of a sudden I had to own these feelings that were mine, and these feelings went back to the time that I was a little kid. I remember being in grade school and they would have Valentine's Day cards, and everybody in the class would get one but me. And we would go out at recess, and everybody would break up into their little crowds, and everybody had a place to go, and they all had friends, but me. And they would come in, and they would have class parties, and they would hand every kid in the class an invitation, but me. And I can't tell you whether or not that's really how it happened, but I can tell you that's how it felt. I knew from the time that I was a small child that there was something different about me, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew it, and I knew that you knew it. I knew you knew that I didn't fit in, that I didn't measure up, that I didn't cut the mustard, and that there was something about me that just didn't quite make it. And I never understood, and I always felt like every kid that was born got some instruction booklet, and I didn't know what happened, but somehow somebody forgot to give me my copy. Because I looked at you and it seemed to me that the rest of the world knew how to interact. They knew how to have friends. They knew how to be part of the crowd. I didn't know how to be part of the crowd. I knew how to be the center of attention. I was the one doing the most outrageous stuff, trying to get you to notice me. You know, look at me, look at me. I learned early on in school that the planets revolved around the sun, and I knew that that was wrong. The world revolved around me. I was the do-all and end-all of the world. Everything that I said was right. I knew everything about everything, and if I didn't know it, I'd make it up. I started using when I was around 11 years old, and I knew from the first time that I used that I was going to do it again and again and again. Because I finally found something where I just didn't care anymore. It didn't matter that I didn't fit in. It didn't matter I wasn't a part of. I just didn't care. I finally found something to numb me. And I started on a 10-year journey that was going to take me to all of the places I said I would never go, to hang out with all of the people that I said I wasn't ever going to be with or be like, and do all the things that I said I would never do. From the time I was about 12 years old, I started praying on a daily basis to die. And I remember lying in bed at night and saying, God, if you really are up there and if you really exist, please don't let me open up my eyes tomorrow. I didn't have the guts to blow my brains out, but I didn't have the will anymore to live. And I couldn't keep on going. I was 15 years old, and I hear us talk about sometimes that, my best thinking got me here. Well, I need to tell you, my best thinking never could have come up with a place like Narcotics Anonymous. My best thinking at 15 years old was, why do you give it away for free? People pay for it. That was a business decision. And I hit the streets at 15 and started to hustle. I didn't make any jails. I made institutions, and the institution of my choice was the flight deck. I like getting locked up on the flight deck. They shot you full of Thorazine, they put you in the corner, and they left you alone. And I continued to get locked up on flight decks. And I never got locked up for being crazy. I always got locked up for acting crazy. And I knew the difference. I knew deep down in my heart that I wasn't crazy. I just didn't know how to stop acting the way I was acting. I didn't know how to stop the behavior. I came in here and I wanted to be your friend so badly. You told me your deepest, darkest secrets, and I swore that I would keep them to myself. And I really didn't mean when you turned your back to tell the person next to me. I really didn't want to do that. I didn't know how to keep my mouth shut. I didn't have any integrity. And I didn't know how to be a friend. On the way to my own funeral, I was blessed to hear the message of Narcotics Anonymous. And it was October of 1982, and I wasn't yet ready to surrender. And it's real important to me to remember that when I'm carrying the message to the newcomer, when I'm doing H&I work, when I'm in my home group and I'm reaching out, my responsibility as a recovering addict is to carry the message. I'm not responsible for the results. That's God's work. I need to keep showing up and doing the next right thing, and what's going to happen is on God and it's not on me. And I wasn't ready then to hear the message, but 6 months later that addict planted a seed for me, and when I was ready to surrender, I knew where to go. And I don't forget my last day out there. I don't forget being in Manhattan on a Sunday morning just like this one. And I don't know about Idaho, but I'll tell you, New York Sunday morning's about the worst goddamn day of the week. Sunday morning is that day when you wake up and there's nobody out. You're sick. Your money's gone. You walk out of an after-hours club that you've been in since Friday night. And you hit the door and you're squinting because the light's coming at you because you've been in this blacked-out room for 36 hours. And you start stumbling your way home. And you know you don't look or smell real good. And you're making your way down the street trying to get back to your apartment, and people are walking and they're all dressed and they're clean and they're showered and they're going to church and they're going to their jobs, and they see you and they take their kids by the hand and they walk them around you. And I don't forget the shame of being that person that you grabbed your children's hands to avoid me. I came into the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous on April 25th, 1983. And thank you. Thank you for giving me a place to celebrate my 15th birthday this weekend. I walked into the rooms of NA, and NA was very new in New York. We had 5 meetings in all of the boroughs of New York City. NA was about a year and a half old because there was something that we had in the state of New York called the Rockefeller laws that were instated by our old Governor Rockefeller. And what they did was they made it illegal for 2 or more addicts to congregate. And so we couldn't have Narcotics Anonymous in New York because they would come to the meetings and they would arrest all of us. And finally, Rockefeller laws were repealed and NA started to come in New York, and it started underground and it started off real slow. And I walked into my first meeting, and I got to tell you, I didn't walk into Narcotics Anonymous to get clean. I came here because I didn't have any place else left to go. When it talks about in our literature that point of desperation that we come to, that was where I was at. I had burned all of my bridges. I wasn't welcome back at my family's house. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anywhere to go but sitting huddled in that doorway that Sunday morning in the rain in the streets of Manhattan, knowing that the fight was over. I couldn't do it anymore. I needed to surrender. The war had ended. And I came here. I didn't have anywhere else to go, and I still didn't believe that maybe the drugs had something to do with it, because I spent my whole life blaming all of you for why I was where I was at. It was my parents, it was not having enough money, it was the people I hung out with, it was the guys I got involved with. Everything was everybody else's fault, and I never accepted any responsibility of my own. And I walked in here and I didn't know what to expect, and I saw a bunch of rough-looking women. That was what I perceived. And once again, I told myself, I don't belong here. And at that time in New York, NA seemed like a special interest group. I thought it stood for Needles Anonymous because everybody else seemed to have used IV drugs and I didn't. But I sat there and, we didn't have a lot of recovery back then in New York. So everybody used to talk about using. And after sitting in the rooms for a few weeks, I learned all about jacking and booting and cooking up shots, and I started to share along with the rest of you. I need to tell you, it was a lot harder getting honest about it than it was to sit there and lie to you. But again, that acceptance, that wanting to belong, and I sat in that room and I didn't know why I was there and I didn't know what I wanted to be there, but I remember sitting in the back and crying my eyes out because I sat and I listened, and what you shared was all of the insanity that went on inside of my head my whole life that I didn't dare tell anybody else. Finally, I found a place where people understood what I was about. You understood what went on inside of my head, and you knew how I felt. I had been searching for this my whole life. I had been medicated, I had been counseled, I'd been locked up on wards. I had the professionals tell me that I was never going to live past my 21st birthday, and I wasn't going to amount to anything, and I wasn't ever going to be able to make it back into society. And I came into a room where I heard a bunch of people saying, "We understand how you feel, and it's going to be okay." And one of the things that you told me was to keep coming back. Well, I don't know about anybody else, but I wasn't the type of addict that got invited back places. When I came anywhere, people usually told me, "There's the door, get the fuck out. Don't come around again." So when I came here and you told me to keep coming back, to sit down, and what Dave talked about last night was so important. Women walked up to me and they didn't just offer me their phone numbers, they took mine. And they called me because I didn't have the self-esteem to call. I didn't have the self-esteem for my first 90 days to get up and get a cup of coffee. I wasn't going to walk across the room because I knew you'd all be staring at me, and what if I spilled it? I mean, my self-centeredness was so incredible. I couldn't imagine what you'd be thinking if you saw me spill the coffee all over the place. So I sat glued in my chair, and it was those of you who came to me and said, "Do you want a cup of coffee? We're going out afterwards. Please come." come out to the diner with us. Come get something to eat. I don't suggest to anybody that you do recovery the way that I've done it, but I'm also not going to lie about my experience, strength, and hope. I came in here, I heard you share. Don't pick up and make a meeting. Don't pick up and make a meeting. And I got to tell you, I didn't hear a whole lot else. And I came in, I sat in the back, I walked in at 8. I didn't talk to anybody. I got up at 9:30. I tried to bolt. Sometimes you grab me for coffee, and I ended up having to hang out. But I really tried to come in and get out as quickly as I could and not be a part of. And I also need to tell you, at that time in New York, as I said, there were 5 meetings in all of the greater New York. We didn't even have a region or an area then. We had 5 meetings in all of the boroughs, and there were about 60 addicts at that time. And the 60 of us used to get on the subway, and we used to ride from meeting to meeting to meeting, because there was a meeting in the Bronx one night, there was a meeting in Manhattan another night, and there was a meeting in Queens another night, and we used to sit and ride the subway with one another. And you know, sometimes today today the greater New York region, at last count, we can't get it right whether we have 1,300 or 1,500 meetings. But I hear people tell their sponsees and their support groups, well, if you're having trouble with somebody, just go to another meeting, avoid the person, go someplace else. I'm real grateful for when I got clean. I didn't have any other meeting to go to, and if I had a problem with you, I needed to sit there and goddamn work through it, or I had nowhere else to go. So when I had about 93 days clean, I stayed from my very first business meeting. I don't know why I stayed. I probably had nothing else to do that night. And lo and behold, you asked me if I would be secretary of my first home group. And that started a lifelong love of Narcotics Anonymous service. I believe, as some people talk about that they are called to the clergy, that some of us are called to service. And when you are one of those people that are called to service, you know that. And you can try to ignore it, and you can try to ignore the voice, but you don't stay away for very long. My sponsor had told me when I was a newcomer that every day that I stayed clean, I owed Narcotics Anonymous a day of service and gratitude, and I fully believe that. My debt is never paid as long as I am still alive and breathing. And I never forget, my top priority is recovery and this fellowship. I've done service for a lot of reasons and a lot of wrong ones. It was pretty cool. It stroked my ego. I got to sit in front of you. I got to tell you my name. You all knew who I was. Maybe I got to carry around some cool stuff. The key to the place. But the bottom line of doing service, and hopefully why I remember why I serve today, is so when that addict who has no idea who we are or what we're about hits the door, there's somebody there to give him a hug and tell him, welcome to Narcotics Anonymous. You don't ever have to use again. So I came in, and I didn't take any of your suggestions, and I didn't do anything that you told me to do. And when I had about 4.5 months clean, I met a guy who had 87 days. And I would love to tell you about how we got into this wonderful relationship, but we had a one-night stand. And I don't know about the type of addict you are, but I'll tell you the type of addict I am. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I started planning our wedding out. You see, you look at me and smile, and I'm choosing houses and furniture. You talk about, that you suggested that I not get into a relationship in my first year. I thought it was a great suggestion. I hoped you took it. It didn't apply to me like most everything else in here. I have to tell you, though, that it's a suggestion that we make that I don't find anywhere in our literature. And I believe in the literature of Narcotics Anonymous. I do believe that it is a good idea to give ourselves some time and a break to start to get to a relationship with ourselves, but it is not a suggestion in our literature. Anyway, this guy was a public figure and a celebrity, and I had kind of had it in my head I was going to be his wife and this was going to be great. And I got up the next morning and he left and we made plans, to do whatever, and that was it. He never called again. And that was the first time in recovery that I dealt with some real pain. And I don't care how long you've been clean, I don't care how many steps you got in your life, being rejected doesn't feel real good. I made a conscious decision, bless you, to use. And I made a conscious decision to use because I did not have any recovery. You see, it talks about in the last line of how it works that we must abstain from all drugs in order to recover, but that abstinence and recovery are not the same things. It tells us in how it works at the beginning how we get some recovery. If you want what we have to offer and are willing to make the effort to get it, these are the principles that made our recovery possible. I had 4.5 months of abstinence and I didn't have a lick of recovery behind me. And because of that, I made a conscious decision to go and pick up because I couldn't stand the pain. And I must have heard something that you told me because I made a phone call and I called another addict. And she suggested to me that I pray. And I ask a God that I didn't understand and I didn't have a relationship with to please remove the obsession to use. And I need to let you know that I have a Jewish mom and an Italian Catholic dad. So if you think that I grew up just a wee bit confused about God, and I don't really mean to knock anybody's religion, I just need to share my experience. I remember my Italian Catholic grandmother taking me to Mass when I was a little girl, and she talked to me about a God who loved me, would be there for me no matter what, would never leave me, and would zap you for shit that you didn't even have to do. You just had to think about it, and it was a sin. Go figure. But I remember that I was on my way out, and I had nothing to lose. And so I asked a God that I didn't believe in to please help me hang on for just one more day. And the miracle that came through that experience was tenfold. I mean, I not only learned that I could get through something and not pick up, but I also learned that this was the program of Narcotics Anonymous. I don't believe that we work this program cafeteria style. I don't believe that you can take what you want and leave the rest. Our program is real simple. It's the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, and you're either going to put them in your life or you're not. Period. And at this point in my recovery, I did not have a sponsor. And I did not have a sponsor because I'm a very intelligent addict. And if you don't know that, I'll tell you that. And because I'm intelligent, I don't need to ask questions. I figure shit out for myself. So one of the things that I heard was, do you have a sponsor? Well, I didn't know what that was, but I wasn't going to ask you. So I figured out for myself what a sponsor was. A sponsor was like when you wanted to become a union member, you needed somebody in there already to sponsor you. So you said to me, Gina, do you have a sponsor? I didn't want to tell you. I walked in here alone, on my own. I said, of course I have a sponsor. It took me a long time of listening to understand what a sponsor really was so I could finally think about going to get one. There are no stupid questions in Narcotics Anonymous. The only dumb one is the one you don't ask, and it just may kill you. If you don't get something in here, please ask somebody. So I decided, all right, I need a sponsor. And I started to look for a male sponsor. I came into the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous and I looked at the women and I said, we have 0 in common. I looked at women and I thought to myself, you're catty, you're bitchy, you gossip, and you sleep with my old man in a hot second. Now, the reason why I felt that way about all women is because that's what I did to you. And I didn't like women because I didn't like me. And I took the way that I felt about myself and I projected it on every woman who ever crossed my path. And a man in my home group got word of what was going on with me, and he pulled me over on the side and he said to me, Gina, if you'd like to learn about men's problems, you can go talk to men. And if you'd like to learn how to be a woman, you need to learn from another woman. Go get yourself a female sponsor. The sponsor that I got is the sponsor that I still have today. She is the longest continuous relationship that I have ever had in my entire life. At times, she's been my sister, she's been my mother, she's been my teacher, she's been my very best friend, and most of all, she's still the woman that I would most like to be like one day when I grow up. She lives in Hawaii now, and I came here this weekend, and this was waiting. This is a traditional Narcotics Anonymous lei that you get on your birthday, and she had sent it over and had it waiting here this weekend. And you know, these are the relationships and the repair that I've had the privilege to have by staying here. Narcotics Anonymous is a program of repair. You've allowed me to repair a relationship with myself. You've allowed me to repair my relationship with God, and I've been able to take that out and repair my relationship with other people. And recovery and life have not always gone the way that I wanted to. You know, I grew up in a single-parent household, which in the 1960s in white middle-class families was not the norm. And I felt different being the little latchkey kid, having that key around my neck and going home every day by myself to an empty house to take care of my kid brother. You know, we talk about in here, we get this treatment terminology that somehow creeps into our program. I don't accuse my family of being dysfunctional. I mean, first of all, I got to be perfectly honest with you. I don't have any idea what that means. The only family that I ever saw that I wanted to be a part of was I used to sit and watch the Brady Bunch. And I always wanted to move to Mrs. Brady's house because nobody on my block lived like that. In my household, there wasn't ever enough money, the lights got turned off, there wasn't enough food, and we were constantly getting eviction notices. And I could stand here and blame my mother for the job that she did. I understand today that she did the best that she could, and I also understood that she did a shitty job. And in spite of her doing not the best job raising me, you know what? I'm 35 years old, and it's about time that I stop blaming her for not breastfeeding me. I am responsible today to be as happy as I want to be. I am responsible today for being as happy as I can be. It all begins and ends with me, and it isn't going to do that if I keep standing there and pointing the finger at what my mom did when I was 6 years old. It's time for me to start standing up for my own life. But because I grew up in a single-parent household, I always wanted a daddy. I dreamt that I would have a daddy one day. So when I had a year clean, I met one, and when I had 3.5 years clean, I married him. My ex-husband was a very nice man. He still is, but we were a very terrible couple. I lived for somebody who had walked off of the streets materially better than I ever dreamt I could ever live. We moved out of the city. We had a big, expensive house in the suburbs. We had 3 cars. I had jewelry. I had fur coats. I traveled. I had clothes packed out of the closets with the tags still on that I never wore because I was miserable and I kept trying to fill it from the outside. You see, you told me for a long time that this was an inside job, and I never understood what you were talking about. You told me in the first step in the basic text that social acceptability did not equal recovery, and I didn't understand what you were talking about. Because the outsides were starting to look pretty good. When I came into the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, my sponsor did not sit down with me and start talking about steps. It talks about that we were reduced to the animal level of living. My sponsor had to start from the basics and start teaching me things like, you know what? You need to take a bath daily. You need to stop not washing your hair for a month and sticking it up in a hat and thinking you look okay. You need to stop taking clothes off of the floor, and if they pass the sniff test, spraying yourself with some perfume. I came into this fellowship when I was 20 years old. And for anybody who's in here who's younger, welcome. You can do it. You can do it. I grew up in this fellowship. Everything that I learned about being an adult, I learned in here, and you taught it to me. And for somebody who came in and had to be taught that you needed to bathe daily, to turn around and to look at everything that I had amassed, I never thought I was ever going to have it. And I found myself at 5 years clean, curled up in the bed, wanting to blow my brains out and not understanding why it felt so bad. And it felt so bad because I wasn't putting these steps into my life, because I didn't have any principles, because I came into the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous and I had some time, because I tried to get this an easier, softer way, because I sponsored a dozen women, because I could memorize the basic text, because I could share all over the place, and I could sound better than you, because I knew the steps and traditions, and I could share on them more intimately than you could, because I was so impressed with myself, and I didn't have the program that doesn't come from our head but comes from our hearts. Because this is a program that we don't intellectualize and memorize. This is a program that we live from the inside out, and I still hadn't understood that. And I didn't understand that just not using wasn't enough anymore. It just wasn't cutting it. And I hear us tell people sometimes, well, you can't be full of shit. You know, you're not going to last here. Well, I can tell you, I'm living proof. You can be plenty full of shit and stay here for a long time. And I turned around one day, and I did not have the guts to leave my ex-husband until I had somebody else's bags packed, sitting by the door, ready to move in when he moved out. Because at 29 years old, the biggest fear that I had at that point in my life was that I had never lived alone. See, I'd gone from my mom's house to some guy's house to some guy's house to some guy's house. And I didn't believe that I could live by myself because my self-esteem depended on having somebody clamped right at my side. That was what made me who I was, because I knew in my heart that I didn't count. I believed that if you met me, you weren't going to like me. And if you liked me, it's just because you didn't know me that well, because I was pretty sure once you knew me, you weren't going to like me. And because people spent their whole lives leaving me, I set up a wall and I pushed you away and I kept you out because it was easier not to let you in than feel the pain of you going. I had a lot of signs from the relationship that I had with a God that the relationship I had chosen after my ex-husband wasn't his will for me. And that became very apparent. I believe that the 11th step is real simple. I believe that the will of a loving God in our life is going to be done. You have a couple of choices. You can work on some meditation and acceptance and take what's coming your way, or you can kick and scream and claw and you can have it come your way anyway. And as much as the message kept coming to me that this wasn't where I was supposed to be, I kept saying, thanks for sharing, God. We'll do this one my way. And what happened was that man promptly turned around and left me for somebody else. And in spite of all of my best efforts, I found myself for the first time living alone. And I need to let you know, for anybody who's fighting with that, because that seems to be something that we don't talk about, but God damn it, every time I share it, I see a bunch of people nodding their heads. It's a fear that we have, and we don't want to cop to it. I need to tell you, it was really okay. It was really okay. For the first time in my life, I had enough closet space. For the first time in my life, if I wanted to go for coffee after the meeting, I didn't owe anybody a phone call. They weren't waiting up. I didn't have to make the bed. I could sleep diagonal and steal the covers. And I remember my sponsor telling me at that point in my recovery, because of course it was poor me, how did I end up in this type of a relationship, how did I do this again? She said to me, Gina, if you walked into a room of 5,000 strange men, all wearing the same blue suit, and you didn't know any one of them, in 5 minutes you'd be headed out the door with the sickest motherfucker in the room. Your picker is broken. And what she explained to me was that being as sick as I wasn't going to be found attractive by anybody who had a shred of self-esteem or an ounce of health. Anybody, male, female, or otherwise, looked at me and went running. And what I got through that in living alone was that I needed to take some time. And I thought that I was going to learn all of these profound things about myself. And I have a real good friend in Texas, and he said, the simplest, most profound thing I'd ever heard. And he said, darling, you have nothing more to learn about yourself. And I said, what are you talking about? I just learned this and that, and I never knew. He said, darling, all you're ever going to gain from this point in recovery forward is the clarity and the ability to see what's been in front of your face the whole time. But when you finally see it, it is going to be nothing new. And he's right. There's been nothing new. As I began to work on myself, God put somebody in my life that I really believe that he chose for me, because I never would have chosen him for myself. I was still into money, property, and prestige. I had 9 years clean. He had 2.5. He had a year out on the street. He likes to tell everybody I took advantage of him as a newcomer. He had a year on the street and a year and a half behind the walls in New York State Prison. He didn't have a job. He didn't have any money. He moved into my home, and everything that he had came in garbage bags, and I thought to myself, oh, God. But you know what I looked for my whole life? I just wanted to be loved for who I was. I just wanted to have somebody who respected me. I wanted to have somebody who thought that I was special. I wanted to have someone in my life who took all of me, the assets and the character defects, and said, I love you, and I accept you as a whole human being. And in this person that I allowed God to choose for me, I found that. Next week, we'll be together 6 years, and I don't know about anybody else, but it's taken me 15 years of recovery to get almost 6 years of monogamy. That may not impress you, but it impresses the hell out of me. I have had the opportunity to share the message of hope with thousands of people in lots of different places, and it's a privilege that I don't take lightly. But I also would prefer one day when I'm gone from here that you remember me not so much for what I've said, but for how I've lived. I was in this fellowship for a lot of years that I shared clean, and I lived dirty. I was in this fellowship for a long time where I could talk the talk and I didn't walk the walk. I sit in meetings and I watch every single one of you. And because you've told me that I'm not unique, I believe that you're watching me too. And no matter what I say, if you watch me walk out that door and do anything contrary to what just came out of my mouth, whatever I said just went out the window. I don't want to be anything but an example of this fellowship in action. I wrote another 4th step 2 years ago, and I told my sponsor, my deepest desire today is to be a kind, loving, and gentle woman of integrity. Yes. Not to just act like that and stab you behind the back when you turn around. Not to have to force myself to be that way, but to really be that way from the inside out. It's really who I want to be today. And I've come to a point where I don't feel vulnerable, I don't feel manipulated, and I don't feel like a victim, because I can reach my arms out, give you a hug, and be soft and gentle. I don't need to carry that mask of who I'm not today. And I'm really okay with it. I have a relationship with a God today that I got through the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, and I looked for God in a lot of places my whole life. I didn't understand what spirituality was about when I came here. I thought that spiritual people were those people who hung out in the airport and handed out flowers. I thought that spiritual people went up into the mountains and prayed in the snow. And I didn't understand that the most spiritual thing that I could do is reach my hand out to another human being and not reach the other one out looking for something in return. I didn't understand that the principles of the steps, the honesty, the open-mindedness, the willingness, the caring, the patience, the tolerance, were what living a spiritual life was about. And I looked for God in all of the places that I wasn't ever going to find him, and I learned that he was in the last place that I ever thought to look, which was right here inside of all of our hearts. And if you ever want to know what God looks like, turn around and take a look at the person next to you. God lives inside all of us, and he speaks to me in two different ways. He speaks to me through you, and he speaks to me directly through my gut when he lets me know that what I'm doing isn't okay. And those are the times that I can or can't choose to listen. And my sponsor has told me that you can do whatever you want in here, and it's all dependent upon whether or not you're willing to pay the price. Life hasn't always gone the way that I wanted. Some of you heard David share last night that 5 years ago I lost a child. And losing a child was the most devastating emotional experience that I've ever had. After he told me that my baby was dead, and I bawled my eyes out, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know where to go. You have a program of repetition that tells you when you don't know what to do, go to a meeting. When you think you know what to do, you go to a meeting. When your ass falls off, you pick it up and put it in a bag and you go to a meeting. And when my husband said to me, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Please just take me to the meeting." And I allowed you to love me. And I allowed you to tell me that if I just held on and I rock on through the storms that life is going to throw my way, I'm going to come out on the other side, and I'm going to be okay if I just don't give up before the miracle. I believe in spiritual experiences, which are those rare moments when you are in the place that you are supposed to be, at the moment that you are supposed to be there, and you know exactly why you're where you are. And a number of years before, a convention in Texas had asked me to come down and share, and I wasn't able to come. And I said, "If you ever call back again, I'll be happy to be there." And I had totally forgotten about them. And when I came back from the doctor that night, 3 years later, there was a message on the machine from that same convention saying, "Would you please come back?" And it didn't make it all better, and it didn't make the pain all go away, but I believe that at the lowest moments in our lives, at the most painful times in our recovery, if you stay open-minded and you keep looking for the miracle, God is going to put one in your life to let you know, hang on and don't give up. And the blessings were there. The blessings were there. There were 15 women at that meeting. I had about 50 phone calls that first night. For those of you who broke my anonymity, I thank you. And I mean that. Because it talks about in the basic text in the second tradition that true spiritual principles never conflict with one another. And when you pick up the phone and you said to one another, "Do me a favor and give Gina a call, she needs a reach out," I thank you for that. And continue to take my inventory. I don't know where we get that from, where we tell people, "Don't take my inventory." I got to tell you, I don't have the clarity to open up my eyes and see what's going on with me. I have only gotten better by those of you who have loved me enough to pull my coat and tell me the truth. Take my inventory, and when you see that I'm doing something less than spiritual, do me a favor, come up and let me know about it. Don't talk about me in the parking lot. That doesn't help. For anybody here who is new this morning, who doesn't know why they're here, I've got to let you in on a little secret. I truly just do not believe that people who aren't addicts wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I think I'm going to go to an NA meeting tonight. If you are here, there's a reason. Please sit and give yourself a break. Give yourself 90 days. If you don't like what we have to offer, you can pick your misery back up at the door. It's totally refundable. The miracle and the blessing that I have today in my life is something that I never thought that I would have the privilege of having, and that is the ability to sit and live comfortably inside of my own skin. About a year and a half ago, I made vice president on my job. And I remember sitting across from my boss as he gave me my promotion, and I just sat there giggling like a fool. And he looked at me, and I think he was wondering if I was crazy, why I was laughing about it. And it's because all that was going through my head was, do you have any idea who I am? Do you have any clue what I've done in my life? And you know what? He doesn't. And that is a gift that I got from Narcotics Anonymous, because believe me, when I hit the door, there was no question about who I was, what I was about, and what I had been doing. You have allowed me to make it all the way back into society as a responsible, acceptable, productive member. You have allowed me to have a relationship with God. You've given me a home, and you've given me a place to come. I believe that everything that I ever needed to stay clean, I heard at my very first Narcotics Anonymous meeting. It took me a really long time to understand what you were talking about. But check it out. You don't use no matter what. You get a home group. My home group is the Fleetwood Sanctuary group in Mount Vernon, New York. We meet Thursday nights at 8 p.m. We're a dynamite step meeting, and we are the best home group in Narcotics Anonymous. And if you don't feel your home group is the best home group in NA, I need to tell you, I used to tell you I suggested you get another one, but I've come to believe that if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem, so make it the best one. So you don't use no matter what. You join a group, you get a sponsor, and you use one. You come early, you leave late, you sit up front, you get involved, you take service commitments. And no matter what, you just stay. And when you do that, your life gets better beyond your wildest dreams, and you don't even know how it happened. I'm going to leave you with a story that I tell everywhere I go. For those of you who've heard me share, I apologize. There was a woman who wanted to learn all that there was to know. And she went up into the mountains, and she found a guru, and she went into a cave. And he gave her a pile of books, and he said, you study, I'll be back. He came in a couple of weeks later leaning on a heavy wooden cane, and he said, have you learned all that there is to know? And she said, no. And he picked up the cane, and he whacked her over the head with it. And this same thing kept going on. He would come in every day, he would ask her the same question, he would get the same answer, and he would do the same thing. Finally, one day he came in and he said, have you learned all that there is to know? And she said, no. And he lifted the cane, and she reached out and she grabbed it in midair. And she was afraid. She didn't know what he was going to do. And he put the cane down and he smiled and he said, congratulations, you've learned all that you need to know. You have accepted that you are never going to learn everything that there is to know, and you've learned how to stop the pain. And I believe that that is the message that you give me on a daily basis in Narcotics Anonymous. No, I am not yet the woman that would love to be. I am not yet the woman that I am working on. But I'm sure not the girl who walked in here either. And you have promised me that it will continue to get nothing but better. I have no other place to go. And I'm not going to try it one more time, because I see too many of you coming in and letting me know that maybe the faces aren't the same, but the deal out there hasn't changed. And before I step down, I'd just like to recognize two people who've been kind of anonymous on the side this weekend, and that's the sign language interpreters. And watching them work gives me a whole new understanding of our third tradition, that the only requirement is a desire to stop using, and it doesn't matter if you're hearing impaired. Once again, I would like to thank Wnircna. I would like to thank you all for your hospitality, for having me here this weekend. I hope that somewhere that God will put us together. I hope that you've had a wonderful convention, that we've been an example of this program in action. So far, it looks like we haven't trashed the place, which is nice. Because for all of you who didn't know it, you joined the Public Information Committee this weekend. To these people here, you may have been their first exposure to Narcotics Anonymous, and our behavior is a reflection of our recovery. And hopefully we have treated this hotel staff and the people here with the utmost respect, that if any one of them or their family has a problem with addiction, they'll tell them, you know what, send them down to Narcotics Anonymous. Those people got it going on. I hope you have all had a wonderful convention. Thank you again. God bless you. And if anybody else hasn't let you know today that they love you, let me be the first to tell you that I love you and God loves you also. I hope you had a great convention. If anybody asks you how NA works, you let them know it works just fine. God bless you.